Hi, I'm Dr. Megan McNeal. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist. As usual, please watch the following video with caution. It contains descriptions of violence and homicide. I once evaluated a defendant who believed his mother was involved in a Nazi satanic sex trafficking ring, and that she had trafficked him and his sister when they were children. He believed that the cult members sexually abused him and his sister, and that the cult members had also killed other children by skinning them alive. He thought his mother had hypnotized him to make him forget about the abuse, and that the repressed memories were now coming to light. At the time of the incident, he was in his late 30s, and he thought his mother had been hypnotizing him for 20 to 30 years to hide the abuse that had happened. This client ultimately stabbed his mother in the neck and killed her, not only because he believed she had previously sex trafficked him, but because he also thought that she and the other members of this Nazi satanic sex trafficking cult were trying to destroy him or kill him or bring him back into the sex trafficking ring. He believed this Nazi satanic cult was responsible for putting voices in his head. He believed they were putting vile, sexually harassing voices in his head, and that he was in a spiritual battle to choose between Christianity and Satanism, and that because he had chosen Christianity, the Satanists were constantly trying to harm him, kill him, destroy him somehow, or alternatively, indoctrinate him back into the cult. These beliefs were all part of his delusional belief system that was related to his mental illness, which was schizophrenia. This client has a type of schizophrenia that is really difficult to treat. It actually doesn't respond well to most medications. And actually, between 30 to 40% of people who are medicated who have schizophrenia still can remain symptomatic. The only medication that worked for this particular client is called clozapine, but because of the life-threatening side effects, which can include things like seizures, serious heart conditions, life-threatening skin infections, people who take this medication have to undergo frequent blood draws to monitor the levels of toxicity in their system. Most jails won't prescribe clozapine because of the potential for these serious life-threatening side effects. And this particular client, when he would go to jail, they would give him different medication that wasn't effective, and he would become psychotic and then decompensate to the point where he had to go to the state hospital where he was put on the clozapine and monitored, and then return to the county jail where they would take him off the clozapine and put him on a different antipsychotic medication that wasn't effective, and then he would decompensate. It got to the point where he believed the jail was poisoning him, and he stopped eating for 2 weeks, and he was finally sent back to the state hospital where he was stabilized on clozapine, and the defense attorney was able to get this client approved to go to one of the few jails that actually prescribes clozapine so he could remain on the medication. The forensic psychologist who evaluated him, which was me for the defense and a state hospital evaluator for the prosecutor, both agreed that this client met the criteria for the insanity defense, which is basically a mental illness causes these symptoms that then cause the person to engage in the homicidal behavior. He wasn't taking drugs at the time. He had a legitimate mental illness that caused him to do this crime. And this client ultimately agreed to go to the state hospital for a lifetime commitment. Another defendant I worked with was living in a group home for people with mental illness, and his medication stopped working. And this can happen where people take the same medication for a long period of time. It becomes ineffective, and often what will happen is the dose gets increased, or maybe the client is put on a different kind of antipsychotic medication. In his case, his medication stopped working. He became psychotic. He was hearing voices that he believed were spirits telling him that the staff members were planning on killing him. On one night, this client ended up beating and stabbing one of the staff members to death. She was a woman in her mid-20s working alone on the night shift, and he believed he was protecting himself when he killed her. Of course, this also brings up the concern about mental health workers' safety when they're working in a residential facility, and the question about why she was alone on the night shift to begin with. This defendant had been found insane long before this homicide happened. He had been in the state hospital for about 10 years due to having psychosis and committing a violent assault against someone else. He did really well for a long time, but he had a history of decompensating when his medication stopped working. He'd been living in this group home for years. When the medication stopped working, he became psychotic, and no staff member noticed until he committed this homicide. When he was stabilized on medication, he was incredibly grief-stricken about his behavior. He was a very pleasant person when he was medicated and when the medications were effective, and he was incredibly remorseful about what he had done. Both psychologists for the state and the defense agreed that he met criteria for the insanity defense. He pleaded guilty to the homicide. It's called guilty except for insanity. And he was sent to the state hospital for a lifetime commitment. He won't ever get out. Another defendant I worked with became acutely psychotic, believing his wife was a zombie who was trying to attack and kill him and eat him. Believing he was defending himself, he shot her in the face. At first glance, this case seems to fit with the insanity defense. But this client's psychosis was actually due to using LSD, which made him hallucinate that his wife looked like a zombie and have the delusional belief she was attacking him and trying to eat him, and that he was defending himself when he shot her. This client had used LSD and psilocybin on other occasions. It's sort of a therapeutic and spiritual practice, and he'd always had good experiences. But on this particular occasion, he had an incredibly bad trip, and that had never happened to him before. So he didn't recognize the hallucinations as being related to the LSD use. He truly believed he was being attacked, that his wife had somehow turned into a zombie, and that he was being attacked by her. He had no insight in the moment and no self-awareness to look outside of what was happening and think, maybe I'm having a bad trip related to the LSD. It didn't even cross his mind. Even though he was clearly psychotic at the time of the crime, this kind of situation doesn't meet criteria for the insanity defense because it's drug-induced psychosis rather than psychosis due to a mental illness. Basically, if someone willingly ingests drugs that make them psychotic, they've essentially given themselves the psychosis, if that makes sense. And so it doesn't count for an insanity defense. This particular client ultimately pleaded guilty to a manslaughter charge and agreed to about 20 years in prison. If you like these videos and you would like me to keep posting them, please hit like or subscribe, and I will keep uploading videos. I have full videos on YouTube and training videos on Substack. Thanks for watching.